Hey, what's going on, everybody? Hope you're having a good evening so far. Alright, so... Yes, on yesterday's stream, Sarika, I guess, was kind of going over what she wanted Takaru to do for the last time before she left. I think she... Wait, what was the deal? No, I think it was, after she left, Shinjo told Takaru that he would have to hide in Uki's room because another cop was gonna come by Alba Dorm. And obviously all the other cops are wanting to arrest Takaru, so he would have to hide. But I think after that cop leaves, then he is going with Kunosato to leave Shibuya, and Sarika is telling Takaru that she is going to fight Wataru. However, Kunosato and Arima both were telling Takaru that they think Sarika is hiding something. Because if she was really wanting to protect Takaru, like protect him, I guess, as long as she lives or as long as he lives, then she wouldn't just have Takaru go with Kunosato and like leave his side. So they're suspicious that Sarika's either hiding something or she's like got something more to her plan than she's telling them. But basically Kunosato said that she didn't think they would have enough time to figure out what that was, so they're just gonna go through with the plan to get Takaru out of Shibuya. And yeah, that's where we left off. So I think Takaru is now hiding in Yuto's room. Or Uki's room, I'm sorry. I thought, yeah. I went to Uki's room to hide before the police officer got here and found Yuto curled up asleep on her bed. He must have been crying for a long time because he was red around the eyes and I could see tear marks on his cheeks. Uki was sitting on the bed, softly holding his hand. She'd probably been like that for a long time. It seemed a very natural thing for her to do.
ちゃんとお姉さんしてるんだな。
いえ、私なんてまだ。
Her voice was soft and kind, so as not to wake Yuto. But there was a loneliness mixed in with her words. I could see that she was looking at a photo on the desk. It was a picture of Yui and Uki. I couldn't tell when it was taken. Yui was hugging Uki from behind and pressing her cheek up against Uki's blushing face. I thought about the person who'd taken this picture. If it wasn't one they'd taken themselves, someone had to have taken it. It wasn't Yuto. If Yuto was there, he'd be standing in between the two of them. And Dad wasn't into taking photographs, which meant it was probably Nano. I could tell what Uki was thinking when she looked at it. She was thinking about when Nano had taken the picture.
出発は夜になるって。準備できてる？はい、一応は。でも、よくわからなくて。
Neither did I. It wasn't that I didn't know what to take. I didn't know what was happening to me. I hadn't even been told where we were going, except that we were leaving Shibuya.
とりあえず、一旦離れるだけだから、心配しなくていいと思うよ。
Wait. I don't think they ever said that. So they're gonna come back to Shibuya at some point? I don't remember them ever saying that.
はい。
Uki smiled just a little at Arimura's attempt to make her feel better.
お前は大丈夫なのか？
大丈夫っすよ。前から旅に出てみたかったんで。
She was joking around, probably because Uki was here. It felt like old times, and I smiled a little. Of course she wasn't okay. She was leaving the town where she lived, and with no notice at all. And she was leaving because someone wanted to kill her.
なんて言うんですかね、こういうの。バンドワゴン？バンドでワゴン？
No, and that second one doesn't even make any sense. Oh yeah, what's gonna happen with Kazuki? Like, she's not going with them, is she? I don't think they said she was. I suddenly realized that Kazuki was in the corner of the room chewing dried squid. I hadn't seen that in a while either. It was kind of a relief. What the hell? The fuck? Okay.
Hana, ユウトが起きちゃうから。着替え足りるかな。買わなきゃダメか。
Arimura tugged at her outfit as she spoke.
有村さん、よかったらですけど。よかったら、ののさんの使ってください。ののさんの部屋にありますから。
Arimura froze. She clearly didn't know what to say.
いや、でもそれは。
いいんです。ね、タクルさん。
I was a little surprised. For a moment, she looked like Nano or Yui. She'd probably decided that she'd protect Yuto, and so she was trying to be a big sister, like they were. I nodded to both of them.
なあ、ノノはどんなものでも無駄にするのが大嫌いだったから、もらってやってくれないか。
けど、先輩は。
いいんだ。
Arimura seemed a little surprised, but her face finally took on a serious expression.
わかりました。もらっていきます。
はい。うん。
あ。
Arimura ran over to Nano's room to get the clothes before the policeman came. I decided I should probably check if there were any clothes left in my room, then stood up.
渋谷を離れる。
I tried to leave the room quietly so as not to wake up Yuto, and then I stopped. Hey, what's up, Ox? How you doing? Just Takaru hanging out in Uki's bedroom. They were just, I guess, kind of talking about what they needed to do before leaving Shibuya.
地震の時、お前は何を望んだ？その結果、尾上がリアルブートされたのだとしたら、あいつに何を求めたんだ
？Really? What's the movie called? I remembered what Kunosato had just said. I looked around as if trying to find the answer to a problem I couldn't solve. And then I saw Uki holding Yuto's hands as he softly moaned in pain.
いや。
I don't have to know, do I? Oh, it's just The Exorcist? I don't have to think about the things I don't know. This is the right thing to do. If I endured that headache long enough, I could probably find the answer. But I gave up and left Uki's room to go get ready instead. Jeez. This is saying, Inside Out 2 already made more money than Dune Part 2 did. Damn. What was that just now? Oh, yeah. Okay. Exorcist. Yeah, you must be talking about The Exorcism. Did it have Russell Crowe? Yeah. Anyway, November 6th, so still the same day. A little after 4 p.m., 7 hours had passed since the beginning of the festivities, and even as the sun began to set, they showed no signs of slowing down. Lines had started forming in front of every food stand and restaurant around lunchtime, and they were all still packed. Man, whatever happened to Russell Crowe's career, man? I mean, now he's doing movies like that. Anyway, there were over 30 concerts, from huge 1,000-seat venues with major artists to tiny little bars with only a dozen or so seats. Each one was standing room only. Guerrilla performance artists would approach the crowds, hoping to attract customers and in turn attract crowds of their own. Over 80,000 people were still in attendance at the festival, which had gone far beyond the organizers' wildest expectations. There were the usual issues associated with big events, like minor fights and lost children, but there had been no major problems so far. Yeah. I think I watched the original Exorcist like a long time ago, but as you know, I'm not really into horror movies, so... I think the only like horror you could really convince me to like go see or whatever would be like psychological horror. The police from the Shibuya station helped keep things safe, but the biggest factor was the volunteer staff. The organizers had been recruiting volunteers up to the last minute to handle the crowds, keeping everyone safe and in a mood to spend money. Many of the volunteers were victims of the original disaster, and the experience they'd gained in the earthquake had taught them how to get along and work with other people. When a major band had made a surprise appearance at the stage in front of the 107, there was a mild panic, but the volunteers formed a human wall to keep people in the crowd safe.
Today is a celebratory festivalなんです。死亡事故とか起こすわけにはいきませんから。
That's what the leader of the volunteers had said to an interviewer who'd happened to be at the scene. He was an honest and sincere man. He was speaking from the heart, and he didn't mean anything more than what he'd said. But his words brought to mind a certain name and a certain face, both among the people who saw him on TV and among those who heard him directly. The word that had made them think of that name was, of course, death.
なにあの人たち。
あれだろ、朝からさ、ニュースでバンバンやってんじゃん。
Everyone there was hoping for the festival to succeed, but at the same time, they hadn't caused a big problem yet, but there was one big concern on everyone's minds. When a girl and her boyfriend left Shibuya Station, heading for the stage at the cultural hall, they saw a group of people wearing eerie masks. There were over a dozen of them, and then another group came from another direction. Suddenly, there were several dozen. Identical masks, identical t-shirts. The faces of two fat men overlapping. It was the sumo stickers. They said nothing. But anyone who got close, whether by accident or because they wanted to get a picture, would flinch away as they heard the eerie sound created as the sumos breathed beneath their masks. The man at the head of the group looked around and then approached a nearby street light. Then he took something out of his pocket and stuck it on the light. It was a sumo sticker. The owner of a nearby crepe stall saw this and frowned, but was too scared by their appearance to say anything. He quickly went back to dealing with his customer. It was something he'd seen again and again since the festival started. The only ones who saw it were people like him, who stood in one place the whole day as they ran their business. The majority of attendees caught up in the flowing crowds saw nothing. But if you were to take all the stickers placed on the ground, on the decorations, on the street lights, on the walls, you'd have enough to cover the huge TVs at Shibuya Scramble Crossing. The stickers were slowly taking over, spreading even to places where no one could see them. They were like a physical manifestation of all negative emotions that lurked within the attendees. It was about 3 hours later, around 7:30 p.m., when they finally exploded. It happened at the place that had been set up for the silent prayer that would end the festival. Right in front of the memorial.
見えねえよ、どけって。
マジであれ？
今すぐ死ねよ、死ね、人殺しが。
宮代です。宮代拓が慰霊碑前に姿を現しました。
A little after 9 p.m., Sarika arrived at the Hikariwo. Most of the attendees had gone elsewhere, and it wasn't as busy as it had been earlier in the day. She looked around and listened to the thoughts of the passers-by. Hold on a sec. Okay.
早くしてよね。死ぬにしても死なないにしてもこのままじゃ帰れないじゃん。どっちでもいいからさ。長尺が。
Sarika whispered as she listened to the worthless thoughts around her. The couple a few feet away glanced over at her, but quickly turned away. Sarika closed her eyes so she could concentrate only on the thoughts around her. As of 9 p.m., all the concerts and street performances, as well as a few of the stalls, were closing up. The festival was nearing its end. After this, the attendees would gather at the specified time for a moment of silent prayer, and then the festival would be over. The crowd seemed to be heading toward the station and the memorial. There were too many people still here for them to all fit in the memorial plaza. So the big VIPs, as well as the families of the victims of the quake, would gather at the memorial itself, while everyone else would watch the proceedings on the TVs in front of the station.
佐久間は多分宮代を殺した後、慰霊碑前に遺体を晒すつもりだな。
Wait a sec. So are you telling me... Now, she couldn't have lied to that extent. I mean, that just made it sound like she's perfectly okay with Takaru dying. I don't know. Both the TVs in front of the station and the memorial park were near the Hikariwo, but the park was just a little closer. And anything that happened at the park would be replayed for people watching on TV. In other words, more people would see it.
おそらくさっきの男もそのための道具。
Oh no. Several hours ago, she'd heard that Miyashiro had appeared in front of the memorial. But she'd quickly learned that the report was mistaken. It was a fake, a man pretending to be Miyashiro, who worshipped him as a messiah, but the man himself had looked like nothing like Miyashiro. Yet for some reason, the media had decided to report it as Takeru Miyashiro himself appearing at the memorial. As a result, security around the park and plaza had been strengthened. And as a result of that, another rumor was spreading, this time that Miyashiro would be appearing there. It was almost certainly part of Sakuma's plot. Sarika opened her eyes and rubbed her stomach as if to check on her injury. It had been almost 24 hours since Sakuma had sliced open her stomach. She still wasn't in top shape. She had lost a lot of blood, and the dull pain in her head that resulted from resisting Sakuma's powers would come back the second she let her guard down. This had been the result of her attacking him in top form last night. She'd survived working with the committee this long, so she couldn't shake her logical and very realistic doubts. Could she really kill Sakuma?
Miyashiro Takuru. Miyashiro Takuru.
A thought suddenly came into her mind, and she frowned suspiciously. That was strange. She hadn't been trying to read anyone's mind. It was from somewhere in her field of vision.
出てこい、楽しませてくれ。
死ね、死ね死ね、かっこよく死ね。
Negative thoughts flowed into her mind, one after another. They were strong and vast in number. It was as if someone had combined all the final thoughts of all the people she'd killed. She forced herself to look in the direction of the thoughts, and saw the group wearing the sumo sticker masks. She tried to squeeze them out of her mind, but they slipped past her and echoed in her head once more.
Miyashiro Takuru. Miyashiro Takuru.
出てこい、楽しませてくれ。
死ね、死ね死ね、かっこよく死ね。
Only strong thoughts and desires could create this effect. It was as if all these feelings had formed into one single strong emotion, a desire for Takeru Miyashiro to appear. For the first time in a very, very long time, Sarika was terrified. She could feel herself break out into a cold sweat. Her logical and realistic doubts vanished. It didn't matter if she was capable of killing him or not. She had to kill him. Miyashiro had to survive. And for that, Sakuma had to die, and soon.
そろそろか。
She looked at her phone and saw that it was past 9:30 p.m. Everyone inside the theater had probably been let out. Shibuya, the Hikariwo building, the 11th floor. The entrance to the theater cube. This room was also the entrance to the office floor, and it was always crowded with people. But now there was no one here save a lone employee and single security guard. The festival event in the theater had finished up at 9 p.m., and there were no other plans to use it.
似合わないな。
The whole floor was lit up, giving its classy design an elegant atmosphere. It didn't at all match what was about to happen inside the theater, because by the time this was over, one of them would be dead on the floor. Sarika stood in front of the convenience store on the floor and waited for the time to come. There was no sign of Sakuma. But then, a little after 10 p.m., she realized something was wrong.
Oh.
The employee and security guard at the front desk suddenly started to leave. They dropped what they were carrying and began to stagger out, as if they weren't thinking about anything. Her eyes went wide, and she immediately tried to read their minds. She felt a sharp pain in her head when she did. They really weren't thinking about anything. There wasn't even the meaningless subconscious noise that all humans produced. Nobody was ever like this. Nobody normal, that is.
思考誘導
The two of them walked to the escalator as if they were in a daze, and then disappeared. All that was left was empty silence.
まったく準備のいいことだ
The fuck was that? Another violent pain struck her. This didn't make sense. They'd already vanished. There was no reason why she should be hearing their thoughts. Where was this heavy strain coming from? She felt something very strange in her mind and body. And then she saw her left hand slowly begin to move, without her controlling it. Bro, they're just gonna leave the scene just like that?
ああ全員いつでも行ける
Shinjo was out of breath. He'd run back to Alba dorm to take the place of the other officer, who I hadn't seen because I was in Uki's room. I could tell he'd been literally running around all day.
よし、今から数時間ここにいるのは俺だけだ。外にいたマスコミ連中にも偽の情報をつかませておいた。今なら誰もいない。車でここを出られる。
宮代や有村はともかく、後で交代した時、山添や立花優斗がいなくなっていることをどう説明するつもりだ？
That was a good question. There was no way to hide that, and it would be his fault if they went missing.
フェリックスならお前や百瀬さんと話している間に鍛えられたよ。心配ない。
別にあんたの心配をしてるわけじゃない。あんたにはこの後もいろいろ動いてもらうことになるんだ。降格ならまだしも、失職されては私が困るんだよ。
ほら、これだから鍛えられるんだ。
Shinjo sighed. Then Uki came in with Yuto at her side and a worried look on her face.
あ
She slowly raised her hand. The other hand was clutching Yuto's tight. Yuto's eyes were still red, and he wasn't looking good. Uki seemed to be trying to hold him up.
どこに行くんですか？
ひとまずは秋葉だ。
What?
秋葉ってあの秋葉原ですか？
ああ。
I'd been sure we'd go somewhere less densely populated.
もっと遠くかと思ってました。
秋葉には久野里さんの協力者がいる。
Shinjo looked at her. Someone helping her?
PC を使った情報収集という点においては、私以上の腕を持つハッカーだ。ふざけた人物だが、ある程度の事情も知っている。しばらくの間、かくまってくれるそうだ。
For some reason, Kunosato furrowed her brow and frowned.
それなりのマシンも融通してもらえることになっている。まあ、交換条件で何を言われるか分かったもんじゃないな。
ん？
Shinjo seemed confused. Evidently, he hadn't met this helper of hers.
とにかく、ここからどれだけ離れるかは問題じゃない。渋谷という街を出ることが先決だ。一旦そこにとどまって様子を見る。
Well, you think it's the guy who was the victim of the first new gen murder?
ということだ。有村さんはどうした？
あ、ノノの部屋で電話してます。
そうか。
Oh, Takumi? Arimura had said she was calling her family before she left. But when she'd taken her phone into Nano's room, she hadn't looked like a girl who was saying goodbye to her family. It had always felt like Arimura didn't want to talk about her family, and I hadn't brought the subject up. So I had a vague sense that they weren't on good terms, but I didn't know anything else.
よし、有村さんの電話が終わったら行こう。車は玄関に寄せてある。 マスコミはしばらく大丈夫だと思うが、乗るときは一応用心してくれ。近所の目もある。
ゆうとも連れて行きますから。
ん？
Suddenly, Uki spoke up. She must have been nervous, because she clutched his hand even tighter. She was acting a little strange, but it was also cute to see how much she cared. I couldn't help but smile. I looked at Shinjo and saw that his expression was much the same as mine.
もちろん、最初からそのつもりだよ。いいかな、ゆうとくん。
Yuto nodded, and then he looked at me.
タクル兄ちゃん。お父さんはどこにいるの？大丈夫なの
？Suddenly, I didn't know what to say. Yuto didn't know anything about what was going on. Nor did Uki, who was also looking at me and expecting an answer. It hurt to see how worried they looked. All I could do was tell myself that I couldn't make it any better.
後で話すよ。
後っていつ？
秋葉原について落ち着いたら必ず。
I could tell Yuto was struggling with his feelings. Now it was his turn to grasp Uki's hand tightly.
わかった。絶対だよ。
あ、ほら、荷物取ってきな。
うん。
The two of them must have felt the exact same way as they went into their rooms, still holding each other's hands. Shinjo looked at me with a pained expression.
大丈夫です。
Of course, that was a lie. But Shinjo was nice enough not to say anything.
新庄さん、一つ確認したいことがある。
Kunosato stared at the hallway where Uki and Yuto had just left as she spoke. I could tell from the way she was acting that it had something to do with Dad.
2時間半くらい前か。慰霊碑公園に宮代拓の名を語った狂言者が出ただろう。
ああ。
I'd remembered the news I'd just seen on my tablet. The TV news and Twitter had all been talking about how I'd appeared at the memorial park. But of course, that was a lie. I was right here.
厳重注意くらいで。明日には釈放か。
その予定だが。
そいつには悪いが。別件でも何でも構わない。数日間交流しておいてくれないか。
Shinjo seemed to know what she was getting at. He looked out the hallway too.
佐久間の仕掛けだと。
She nodded.
タイミング的には狂言者なんていくら湧いてもおかしくないが、仮にも宮代拓になりきろうとした人間だ。何の工夫もなく名前だけを語ったのが気になってな。宮代との違いなんて遠目からでも一発でわかるはずだろ。
It's true that he wasn't a Chaos Child Syndrome patient, Shinjo said. That was confusing. When I'd seen the man on my tablet, his height and age had been mostly the same as mine. From a distance, it would have been hard to tell us apart. And what did Chaos Child Syndrome have to do with it, when that was just a type of PTSD?
できればそいつのここを調べてみたい。
Kunosato tapped at her temples.
わかった。なんとかしてみよう。
It was also strange to see how easily Shinjo agreed to keep an innocent man locked up.
そろそろ出発しよう。有村さんにもそう伝えてくれ。
He pointed to the clock before I could ask any questions. It was 10 p.m.
はい。荷物はもうまとめてありますから。あれ？
I opened the door to Nano's room to tell Arimura it was time to go, but there was no one there. The lights were off, too. Was she done talking on the phone? Which would mean that she was having Kazuki get the last of their things together, so she'd be in the dining room, or maybe Uki's room. Come to think of it.
結局、和樹を最後まで付き合わせちゃったな。
Kazuki wasn't involved in this case directly, but she was helping a lot just because she was a member of the newspaper club. Still, I couldn't ask her to come with us. While we'd been waiting for Shinjo, she tried to tell us that she'd come too. Of course, using only a series of mumbles and gestures like always. But I'd refused, though I was grateful from the bottom of my heart. She seemed unsatisfied, but I'd finally gotten her to agree to it by promising to keep in touch and to come straight to her if we needed help. I couldn't cause any more trouble for someone who wasn't part of the case.
当事者か。
I was suddenly suspicious of the smells in Nano's room. Without bothering to turn on the lights, I shut the door behind me and walked over to her desk. I ran my hand along it, and only then did I realize it was the first time I'd been in here since her death. That's right. Nano wasn't supposed to be a part of the case.
なんでだ？ジョーちゃんは幸せにならなきゃいけねえ子だろうがよ。
I knew that. He was right. She wasn't supposed to die. There was no reason she deserved to die. She was simply killed because she'd learned Sarika's secret. What was her real goal? I remembered what Kunosato had asked me this afternoon. What was she really after? I almost screamed as I heard a loud noise from inside my bag. It was the sound of my phone vibrating. I quickly flipped over the bag and spilled its contents onto the floor. I picked the phone up off the floor and read the words "unlisted caller" in the darkness. That was kind of creepy. I did not have a good feeling about this. Afraid, I touched the answer button.
誰だ？
一つ言い忘れたことがあってな。
お前。
I moved the phone away from my ear in surprise. It was Sarika. There was no mistaking it. I checked the time on the phone without even thinking about it. 10:03 p.m.
話を聞け。すぐに終わる。
なんでお前。
I realized how hard my heart was beating, and I put the phone back up to my ear.
そんなことはどうでも。
I heard a sudden, abrupt noise. Had she dropped her phone? Or had something happened? I listened carefully so as not to miss a single sound. My hands were trembling violently. I hated it. And after I waited a moment,
宮代、聞いているか。
her voice was somehow weak and feeble. Something was off about the way she was acting.
聞いてる。なんだよ。
一つ言い忘れたことがあってな。
It was the same thing she'd just said.
おい、どうしたんだ。なんか。
お前の両親を殺したのは私だ。
I could hear the sound of the words she made, but I couldn't understand the meaning of the words themselves. But for some reason, my hand stopped shaking, and it suddenly seemed like everything around me had faded away into a white blur. What? The words were stuck in my throat. I couldn't speak.
6年前、渋谷地震の時、あの避難所でお前の実の両親を殺したのは私なんだ。
Once again, I could hear the words, but I didn't understand them. 6 years ago, Shibuya earthquake, shelter, real parents.
Huh?
My cheeks suddenly felt hot, and my blurry vision came back into focus in the dark room. Only then did I realize what she'd said. But what I felt wasn't rage.
なんで？
It was an important event from my past, but one I'd totally forgotten. My parents hadn't died in the earthquake. Someone had murdered them at the shelter. It was what Nano had refused to tell me when I'd just woken up from my coma. That was why she'd lied to me. And that's why I'd run away from Alba Dorm and gone to live in Miyashita Park.
なんで
I repeated. Why would she do that? Why would she tell me that now? All I could hear was pained breathing. I kept waiting anyway. I couldn't hang up the call.
今伝えなければいけなかった。言い忘れていたんだ。
だからなんでなんだよ
I yelled at Sarika as she repeated herself. No, I don't think Nano saw it.
おい尾上尾上
Suddenly, the call ended. She'd hung up. I tried to call back and realized it was impossible. It was an unlisted number.
一体何なんだよ
I whispered, knowing I wouldn't get an answer. Really, what the hell? What was the point of calling me like that? No, there was a bigger question. Why?
尾上は何のために生まれたんだ
That day, I happened to meet my parents at the shelter, and then I had a terrible headache. That was probably when Sarika was born. And then my parents were murdered at the shelter, which would mean that she murdered them right after I created her. My thoughts were a mess and it was hard to think, but something told me I had to figure this out. Sarika said her goal was to keep me alive. But would killing my parents help me with that? Mom and Dad were trying to get me out of the shelter. Killing them would make me less likely to survive, not more. Just like Kuno Sato said, it didn't make sense. That's right. What Sarika was saying didn't make sense. The very first thing she'd done after being born didn't make any sense. Which meant...
あいつの目的は僕を生かし続けることじゃない
Suddenly, I found myself looking at the picture on my phone. It was the photo of me and my family from Alba Dorm. It was the same as what had happened with Nano. Sure, she'd figured out who Sarika was. But if Sarika's goal was keeping me alive, would that mean killing Nano? Nano would always try her best to protect me. She'd even risk her life to do so, which would mean that, for Sarika, it would be better to keep her alive. She could have just done what they did with Ito and used mind control to alter his memories about her real identity. So why didn't she? Why did she have to kill Nano? Did she have some other goal? Was that why she had to take Nano's life? If that was the case, then I could feel a certain desire welling up within me, one I hadn't felt in a long, long time. I would find out why. And I would find out if my ridiculous idea was true. And for that to happen, I have to go there. No matter how things ended up.
本気かよ。僕は。
I checked the time on my phone again. 10:10 p.m. There were 18 minutes left until the moment when everything began. I laughed a little and ran my hand along Nano's desk again. Was I betraying Nano again? If she was still alive, would she have slapped me across the face if she found out about it?
ごめん。でもお前だってさ。
Hello, Derek. How are you doing? You lied too, in the end. You lied to protect me. So I'm going to do the same. Because this is about you, and you mean everything to me. This is about the reason why you died.
何も知らなくていいなんて。そんなのごまかしだよ。
Of course, thinking about what I was about to do terrified me. But I wasn't going to change my mind, no matter what. Surprisingly, it was Arimura, not Nano, who slapped me. She hit me so hard that the impact traveled all the way to my ears and made them ring.
バカ言わないで。何かっこつけてるんですか。
So how are you doing, Derek?
何笑ってるんです。
いや、やっぱりそうだよな。
I put my hand to my cheek where she'd struck me, and it felt a little hot. I'd laughed because it hadn't hurt as hard as when Nano did it. Nano was used to slapping people's cheeks after all. Or maybe she was just really strong. But Arimura seemed to think I was laughing because I wasn't worried at all. Her shoulders shook more violently with rage.
危険すぎます。向こうが何を企んでるのかわからないんですよ。
話を聞きに行くだけだ。多分大丈夫だと思う。
そんな嘘つかないでください。私に嘘が通じないのは分かってるでしょ。
Arimura was out of breath and seriously angry. She was worried about me.
タクルさん。
Uki and Yuto were standing next to her, looking worried. I leaned down so I was at their height.
安心してくれ。話を聞きに行くだけっていうのは本当だから。
でもその先は嘘だろう。お前は多分殺される。
久野里さん。
Of course, I knew that. There was a good chance I'd be killed, and Dad would be the one who killed me. But I wish she wouldn't say it in front of Uki and Yuto.
お前は喧嘩すらしたことがない。違うか？
はい。でも。
I had to go. My head knew it was stupid, and my heart was filled with terror. But there was something even deeper that drove me forward.
クルス先輩はそんなこと絶対に望んでない。
え？
ウキから手紙のこと聞いたんです。
そっか。
クルス先輩の気持ち踏みにじるんですか？
そうだな。あいつきっと怒ると思うけど。
And she'd probably slap me hard across the face like Arimura just did.
でも僕は行くよ。
Arimura looked like she was about to raise her hand again. But then she stopped, clenched it into a fist, and lowered it. Her eyes were a little red as she glared at me.
なんでそんな。
ごめん。
Her voice was so soft, I could barely hear it. I lowered my head, unable to even look at her.
ウキとユウトのこと頼むな。
知りません。先輩は長男でしょ。ちゃんと帰ってきて自分でお兄ちゃんをやってください。
You're terrible, she whispered as she left the room. Someone suddenly waved something in front of my face, and I leapt back. Kazuki had come up next to me. I wasn't sure when. She always surprised me like this.
お前まだいたのか。
I can't leave you all here, her face seemed to say. She was holding a piece of candy on a stick. A lollipop? How many of these did she have? I couldn't refuse her, so I took it and put it in my pocket. I'd probably never eat it, though.
最後まで付き合わせて悪いな。ウキたちのことを見送ってやってくれ。そうしたら気をつけて帰れよ。
I didn't think she'd do it, but I didn't want her going with the two of them. I'd feel terrible for her family if that happened. She nodded like she always did. I tried to make sure that was a yes, but before I could, she ran out of the room after Arimura. Kunosato was here too, so it would be okay, right? She would make it home, right?
タクル兄ちゃん。
Yuto spoke up, afraid, as he saw me watch her go. To be honest, I wasn't sure what to say. anything I said felt like it would just make him more nervous. I tried to choose my words carefully, but in the end, this was all I could come up with.
行ってくる。後で必ずユウトたちと合流するから。
I could tell from his face that he realized it was one of the white lies that adults often tell children. But he didn't say anything. He just looked at me with the eyes that were redder than Arimura's.
いってらっしゃい。待ってますから。
ああ。
ずっと待ってますから。
ああ。
僕も待ってる。ずっとずっと。
ああ。
Maybe Uki's hand on his gave him strength, because he finally forced himself to say one last thing. I'm sorry, Yuto. Thanks, Uki.
じゃあ、行ってくる。
I checked the time. There wasn't much time left, and if I stayed here any longer, my resolve would begin to waver. I nodded one last time at the two of them, then turned around. It was decided that Shinjo would drive me to the Hikariwo. I wanted him to take the others to Akihabara as soon as possible, but I didn't see how I could get through the area around Shibuya Station on my own.
宮代。
As I left to get in the car, Kunosato called to me from behind.
スマホは持っているな。
I put my hand inside my pocket to check. Of course it was there.
持ってますけど。
何でもいい。もし委員会の情報を手に入れたら、すぐに連絡しろ。
I chuckled. That was exactly what I'd expected her to say. I didn't know if I'd find anything, but I promised that I would.
尾上からは、お前を渋谷から脱出させるよう言われている。それを承諾したのは、能力者を渋谷から出せば委員会に近づけるというあいつの言地があったからだ。
はい。
かといってお前自身がそれに逆らう決断をするのならそれを止める義理はない。別にお前にこだわる必要はないんだからな。山添や有村さえいればそれでいい。
ねえ、そうですね。
I know, right? Whatever. Good lord. She really just doesn't fucking care about, like, human life at all. She was correct. If getting a psychic out of Shibuya would cause something to happen, Uki and Arimura would do just as well as I would.
だからお前のことは待たないぞ。
Her words seemed to be testing my resolve one last time. So I looked her dead in the eye and answered.
構いません。分かってますから。
But for a while after that, she said nothing. She seemed to be, for once, at a loss for words. I frowned. Did she not like that answer?
何か？
お前のさっきの話だがな。
She finally opened her mouth hesitantly. She was probably talking about the call I'd gotten from Sarika. When she told me that she was the one who killed my parents.
それが事実だとするなら。
何ですか？何か思い当たることでも？
いや。
Kunosato probably found Sarika's words strange, just like I did. They didn't make sense. And Kunosato probably had a theory of her own, and one she was reluctant to share. But in the end, she put her hand on my shoulder without saying a word. Huh? Until now, all she'd ever done was grab me or choke me, so I was surprised. I'd never expected this.
どのみち、お前が確かめるべきことだ。せいぜい悔いのないようにするんだな。
And the words she said were different than usual, too. Kunosato was saying something nice to me? A psychic?
なんだ。
いえ、その。
I was so surprised that I said something I shouldn't have.
どうせなら、ケイさんの締めの一言でお願いします。リスナーだったんです。
ふざけるな。情報操作の放送以外であんな八方美人な人間を演じるのはごめんだ。とっとと行け。
She pushed me away with the hand she'd placed on my shoulder. I suddenly felt embarrassed. Why had I said that? I was so embarrassed that I tried to hurry into the car. Kunosato looked at me and said,
どうしても聞きたいなら次の放送まで待つんだな。
I turned around and looked at her face one more time. Her features were elegant, and her beautiful, almond-shaped eyes were always frozen cold. They never betrayed what she was really thinking. Her personality was as cold as ice, befitting a dedicated scientist who was always willing to do whatever it took to achieve her goal, regardless of the cost. But sometimes I caught a glimpse of some burning passion inside her. She really was a mysterious girl. Oh, right. There was one last thing I had to ask her, since this might really be my last chance.
なんだ、人の顔をじっと見て。
久野里さんは何の能力を持ってるんですか？
なんだと。
The distance between us had started to shrink, but it grew back with that one question. I felt all the air around me freeze. I panicked.
だって見たんですよ。久野里さんの部屋で。
何をだ？
ディソードです。あれは久野里さんのものでしょう。
は？
Just as I thought things between us would end with another series of cold insults from her, Kunosato started to laugh. She kept laughing in a low voice as I stood there with my mouth hanging open. All I could do was stand there and watch. I didn't know Kunosato could laugh like that.
お前、本当に真のギガロマニアックスなのか？本物と偽物の区別もつかないとはな。
偽物？
あれはただのレプリカだ。研究用のな。6年前の資料を取り寄せて、アメリカの私の研究室が作った。ばらつきがあるにしろ、ディラックの海とのパイプがなぜ剣という形を取るのか、その解明をしようとしたが無駄だった。で、廃棄されたガラクタを押し付けられたわけだ。あんなもの邪魔になって仕方ないが、まあ物干し代わりに使っている。
And then she laughed again. After she was done laughing, she pushed me into the car. And before she closed the door...
ああ、そうだ。お前の同級生、伊藤だったか。あいつはなんとか助かりそうだぞ。忘れてるようだが、それと引き換えにお前は私の実験台になると誓った。その約束、戻ってきてちゃんと果たせよ。
Yeah, remember he like went crazy and shit and was bashing his head in the concrete and all that shit. Then she closed the door. I nodded from behind the window and mouthed the words, "Thank you for everything." Everyone really was trying to make me feel better. Everyone really did want to see me again. But now I was going alone down a path that meant that might never happen. Yeah, after he like...
静かだな。
After he killed Yui, he was like telling Takaru that he was doing it for Senri and shit, and then he just kind of like, yeah, he just kind of went insane and was just like hitting himself in the head and just like bashing his head into the concrete and stuff.
Hi.
Shinjo said mostly to himself from the driver's seat. The Shibuya intersection was overflowing with people. They were all looking up at the footage of Memorial Park being displayed on the big TV screens. The time was 10:21 p.m. 7 minutes until the time when the earthquake began 6 years ago. When the time arrived, there would be a moment of silent prayer, and the festival would reach its finale. Everyone at the festival seemed to be heading for the park, or the intersection in front of the station, to participate. I could see a man who looked like a member of the city council on the screen. I don't know, you've lost me, Ox. From the subtitles, he seemed to be giving a speech about the restoration project.
まただ。頭を下げろ。
はい。
Shinjo had gotten this card just to take us out of Shibuya. The windows were tinted, so I didn't have to worry about anyone seeing me. But there was no way to hide from anyone looking at me from the front. Just in case, I kept myself as far down in the space below the seat as I could. We'd run into a lot of roadblocks once we'd entered this area, with the volunteer staff stopping us from going forward. Okay, yeah, I think I'm following what you're saying now. Each time Shinjo had shown his police notebook and explained that this was a police car, and each time they'd let us through. But that meant that it was taking twice as long as usual.
ギリギリ。というか、28分には間に合わんかもしれないぞ。
Shinjo said as he slowly weaved the car through the crowds of people.
いえ、送っていただくだけでありがたいです。
I never would have made it to the Hikari-wo on my own.
時間を過ぎれば、佐久間と鉢合わせする可能性は高くなる。それでも行くんだな。
はい。
I could see Shinjo's face in the rearview mirror. He'd put his fingers up to the bridge of his nose and his expression was pained.
警察官としては最悪の行為だ。命の危険があるところに未成年を送り届けるなんてな。佐久間がシアターキューブにいるのなら一緒に乗り込んで拘束したいくらいだ。だが今の俺では佐久間の犯行を何も証明できない。上層部にも圧力がかかっている。まるで安物の刑事ドラマだな。
委員会っていうのはそんなに強い権力を持ってるんですか？
詳しいことはほとんど誰も知らない。いや、知った者は闇に葬られてきた。
Is he talking about Senri here? Irritated, Shinjo swerved the car around a group of pedestrians that were standing in the middle of the street. I ducked down so I couldn't be spotted from outside. It was a little cramped.
昼間言ってた新庄さんの先輩もですか？
I remembered him talking about that. About how this case was his way of avenging a detective he respected a lot. Oh, wait. He might be talking about Bon, actually. Shinjo ignored me and kept looking forward. It felt like his silence was a yes.
なんだ？
Shinjo lowered the window just a crack to hear what was going on outside.
どうした？もう終わっちまうぞ！
ヘタレのレッテル貼られっぞ！宮代拓郎！出てこいや！
酔っ払いか。
In front of us, by the side of the road, was a van advertising the Restoration Festival. A group of people had climbed on top of it. They must have been college-aged, and they were holding beers in their hands.
情弱か。
Hearing them, or even seeing them, was upsetting. I leaned back into the seat, closed my eyes, and lowered my head again.
久野里さんもたまにそう言うな。
Shinjo closed the window and started to drive away from all the commotion.
情弱、情報弱者の略だったか。
ええ。
I watched all the drunks pass by the other side of the tinted windows.
彼らは知らないし、知ろうとしないんです。自分たちが煽ってる相手のことも、その相手がどんな気持ちなのかも。
Or what the people they're talking about are going through. Violence, murder, the darkness in the human heart. They think they understand these things because they read or hear about them, but they don't ever think about what they must really be like.
君は会った時から知るという行為にこだわっていたな。
The first time I met Shinjo was...
ラブホテルの事件の時だ。君たちが勝手に現場に入り込んでいた。
He was right. Shinjo was the one in charge of that case, and that's how we'd met.
これから尾上に会おうとしているのも何かを知るためなんだろう。
はい。
I had to know what Serika was really after, and the real reason she'd come into existence.
そうか。言ってみれば、自分のことを知るためなんだ。
What had I wanted during the earthquake? What wish had created her? I realized for the first time that I was trying to find out more about myself than Serika.
先輩もそんな人だったよ。
え?
I looked in the rearview mirror again. Shinjo was still watching the traffic in front of him.
とにかく知ろうとすることに対して貪欲な人だった。そのためなら世間の常識も警察の理屈も関係ない。
Yeah, he's definitely talking about Bon.
よく百瀬さんに怒られていたらしい。突っ走りすぎだって。
そうだったんですか。
Shinjo's voice took on a strangely different character. His tone changed from one of nostalgia to one of sorrow.
そして先輩は突っ走りすぎた。
That was the answer to his silence before, too. Had he been killed by the committee?
先輩の最後を俺はよく知らない。ただ先輩は満足だったろう。少なくとも後悔はしていないはずだ。でもな、だからといって先輩の死を認めるわけにはいかない。俺は先輩に追いつけなかったし、止めることもできなかった。俺は悔しいんだ。クルス・ノノさんがここにいればきっと同じように感じるはずだよ。君のこと。
I fell silent. there was nothing I could say. But I was truly glad that he was the one who read Nano's letter, and that he was the one who was helping me. Alright, I think this is where I should stop for tonight. No Zane tonight, it doesn't look like. Yeah, I have quite a few VTuber clips saved up, but I'm not gonna watch him if he's not here, so... Yeah. Ugh. Damn. Alright, man. Well, tomorrow I will continue on with Chaos Child. I mean, I think we are like basically right at where the climax of the of the story here begins. Yeah, and I don't know. I'm not sure when I'm gonna get another chance to look into more games I can stream. Didn't really get to do that today, but anyway. Alright, man. I'll be back again tomorrow night. So I'll see you then. Have a good night.